Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alison, the online piano and violin tutor. If the violin is shaking when you're trying to do vibrato, that is the number one sign that you are attempting vibrato too soon. Number one, the first thing you're going to need is a violin. I have been playing the violin since I was 4 years old. I went to university and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in music.
With the amazing talent that's Alison Sparrow. Alison, come out here.
So bear with me if there are any technical hitches, I'm sure it'll be fine. For about 5 years I was an examiner for the London College of Music. And over the years I've seen basically the music world from every kind of possible view really, and because of that it has enabled me to write my own violin course. Hello everyone, well, so there we go, that's kind of all you really need to know. And don't forget guys, anyone can learn to play the violin. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Alison, the online piano and the online violin tutor. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've all had a good week. Without any further ado, let's just get on with the questions. Right, I'm going to go right back to the top. Getting started then. So, Brian Gray, I'm on course 8, exercise 5, lesson 8, exercise 5. I assume that means I find it hard moving back from A on the D string. My fingers are short, so I try to slide back to an F. This is very difficult. Is this normal? If you are watching this, Brian, I'm not entirely sure what you mean about sliding back. So what I'm assuming you're meaning is that you're playing an A on the D string. So that's going to be with your fourth finger, D, E, F, G, A. So I assume you're talking about your fourth finger on the A string, and then when you want to play an F, you're sliding back to it. So I can only imagine that your fingers are just not sitting in the right place and you're having to sort of move them. It can be normal. You've got to remember that the violin is a new thing to you. So you've only been playing the violin 5 minutes. So there's going to be lots of things that you can and can't do. Things like that, I wouldn't particularly, they don't particularly bother me. They wouldn't be something that, you know, it's something that you've got to sort out or forever hold your peace. It's going to hinder you and you're going to have to get, it isn't going to be anything like that. I would just try and keep the fingers down in the same sort of place. So try not to sort of move fingers. So first finger there, second, third, try and keep your hand in that sort of general position rather than sliding fingers backwards and forwards. They should sort of already be where they are. So when I am playing the violin and I'm playing other things, or when I'm just playing just in general, my fingers generally stay there. They move across the string, so E string, A, D and G, but generally my fingers don't tend to kind of spread apart. They stay there. First finger stays there, second, third. Does sort of make sense? So just get used to trying keeping your fingers in that general kind of position. Then when you have to lift them up and put them down again, they're going to be where they are. So assuming that that's what you mean, yes, it can be normal. I wouldn't necessarily worry about, but I would try and keep those fingers more in place rather than kind of moving them about. But as I say, you've only been doing this 5 minutes and you're very early on in the course, so things like that don't really tend to sort of bother me. Okay. I used to play the violin professionally, but I stopped for 2 years and back to the violin, starting again, stopping again. I'm tired of this and I'm lost. What should I do? Go back to, if you've played professionally, just go back to what you were doing before. If you've got to a point where you were at a professional standard, then you shouldn't find it too hard to kind of revive everything and go back to where you were. It's just, it's like, for example, for when I was at college, I used to play the tenor recorder. I was in a recorder group, and we all got, everybody that was in our little quintet or quartet, I think there was 4 or 5 of us, I can't remember off the top of my head, we all got to be very good at it. And I haven't played the recorder or the tenor recorder for donkey's years, but because I got to quite a good level at it, I would bet that if I had a tenor recorder, or a recorder of a tenor and the recorder are exactly the same thing, the tenor is just bigger. If I got a tenor recorder again, it probably wouldn't take me very long just to get back into it. So it's much harder to get back into the swing of things if you are very early on in your playing career. So if you're a beginner or intermediate player, you've only been playing for a matter of months or a few number of years. But if you got to a professional level, then that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But what I would do is just go back to the last things that you've been playing on, and just go back and sort of start on them. As for starting and stopping, well, not really much I can say about that because that's more of a life thing for you. I can't, I don't really know what your schedule is and what your timing is and things like that. But maybe try and start the violin when you know you've got a good run at it, when you know that you don't have any roadblocks ahead of you stopping you or anything like that. So I hope that has helped. Right. Hi, Tracy. Hi, Chris. Let me just address Persian. So yes, I did get to the email. I did reply. I can't find, I know who you're talking about, your friend. I can't find any books that have been purchased on that account at all. I did reply to the email. So get them just to email me again. Right. Hi, Archie. Hi, Jet. Hi, Adam. Hikagaya001. Katie. Hi, Bia. Wow, we've got loads of people joining us today. Right. Now, have we got any... Tracy, okay. Can you explain the note values in 6/8 time? So when you're talking about time signatures, hold on a second. Let me see if... I want to just see if I can grab the page that I'm talking about so that I can hold up some visuals for you. Bear with. Time signature. Okay, so if you're working on or will be working on or have worked on book 2 lesson 12, so we're talking about time signature. So time signature are these two numbers that you get at the front there, and they're going to tell you how many beats there are in a bar or how many beats there are in a measure if you're in the UK, if you're in the US. So the top number will always tell you how many. So in Tracy's example, we're talking about 6/8. So it's talking about 6. So how many? 6. The bottom number will tell you what type of. So let me just see if it says what the bottom number is in here. It doesn't say what the bottom number is in here because I haven't put it in this book. But the bottom number will determine what type of note you are counting in. So, for example, it could be a quaver, a crotchet, a semibreve, or an eighth note, a quarter, a half note. Just if you're in the US, there we have different terms for the names of notes. So, for example, if you are talking about these notes here, which to us are quavers, in the US they're eighth notes, which is why I've got US notes and UK notes. So if you are talking about a 4 on the bottom of your time signature, a 4 refers to this, a quarter note. If you are referring to Tracy's example as 6/8, 8 refers to these, which are eighth notes. So you're counting you're counting 6/8 notes in a bar, or 6 quavers in a bar. So that's all it means. That's all it means. The top number is what the top number is. Whatever the top number is, that is how many. The bottom number is how many of. That's what you are counting in. Probably, I don't have any kind of sheet music or anything to kind of properly explain. It's probably a bit of a whole lesson on its own to explain that. But suffice to say, that is in a nutshell, that is exactly what 6/8 is. So the top number is always how many. The bottom number is always what type of. So if it was 6/4, we know that, or we just said that 4, if there is a number, it's going to be one of these. So it's going to be a crotchet or it's going to be a quarter note. But we're going to be counting 6 of those in a bar. But we are going to, in this example, we are counting 6 of those in a bar. It just helps you divide the bar a bit better when you're counting and when you're trying to work out the rhythm and the timing and things. Okay. Now, right. John says, hi Alison, just curious, what are the typical daily practice routines for a professional violinist? Scales, arpeggios, etudes, pieces of music. Mostly etudes and things. I mean, it completely depends. I mean, I don't really do that much intense practice so much anymore because I don't do any concert work or anything like that. But I do practice scales and arpeggios. They are very good to do that. Occasionally, I'll practice etudes if I feel what I'll be driven with mostly. I speak for myself. Obviously, I can't speak for any other professionals that are not here. But speaking for myself, if I am playing a challenging piece of music, for example, and there is quite a lot of, I don't know, let's say there's quite a lot of spiccato bow work in there, and maybe I feel like my spiccato, I haven't done it in a while, or I haven't practiced it so intensely in a piece, I will go and find most probably a Kreutzer etude that has a lot of spiccato in it, and then I will work on that exercise to get as good as I can on spiccato, and then I will take that and I'll put it into the piece that I'm practicing so I can play it. So when you're learning pieces from a more professional standpoint, when you're looking at the music, you can already read the music. So you could probably already go in straight away and have a very good level of playing it. I could probably play any type of piece of music from start to finish pretty decent. To everybody else it would sound pretty good. To me, I'd have no nuances in there. The bowing wouldn't be there. I'd have no technical bowing ability. I would just literally be playing the notes as a shell of themselves. And then you go in and you put all the technical stuff. So the harder the piece of music, or the more challenging the piece of music, generally the more technically demanding it is. And that's when I would pick certain etudes or certain studies or anything like that corresponded with the technical challenges that I've got in said piece of music. Otherwise, you couldn't possibly just keep doing all the etudes and all of the studies all the time, because there would just be too much going on all the time, and you wouldn't need to do that. So that's generally how I tend to work these days with things. Just pick and choose the etudes or studies that correspond with the technical stuff I'm working at the moment. Okay. Bia says, when doing pizzicato, how do you play two slurred notes? Do you pluck the strings once or twice? You can't really do pizzicato with a slurred. It doesn't really work like that because you're actually plucking two notes. So just pluck two notes. If there is a slur over the notes, then it just means sort of play those two notes more. Play them less separated. I can only kind of explain it as. So if you were playing two slurred notes, you would play both those notes in a down bow, or both those notes in an up bow, whatever. But obviously you can't slur pizzicato, because every time you pluck the string, it is one individual note. But if there is a slur over those two notes, then it would just more or less mean just try and play those slightly more or slightly less detached, I guess. Okay. Or when there is, Bia also says, follow on from that, or when there is a half note or there is a formata over the note. So a formata is a US term for pause. I believe that we use pause in the UK. That's the one with the little what would you call it? Like with the arch and the eye. So the little eyebrow and the little eye. That's what we call a pause. US is formata. Again, it's just because there's a pause over the note doesn't mean to say that you can't slur it. You're just sort of pausing over that note, exactly like that. So it's there. You're just pausing over it. You're just giving an air of suspense, or maybe just slight apprehension before you do it. So you can still slur and you can still pause at the same time. I know it sounds like a bit of a contradiction in terms, but you definitely can do that. Brian, yes, I'm glad that's helped you. Adam M4, what can you use to keep your violin's varnish in top tip shape? I don't really use anything on my violin. There's probably two different types of varnish that you're going to get on a violin. This is my antique. This is my antique violin here, and I've got I don't know if you can sort of see, I've got a very soft varnish on here, or not really any varnish. You can see, I'm just trying to get it so the light reflects. There you go, a bit of purple there. So you can see I've got some varnish around here, but I haven't really got much varnish sort of going on there. Back's obviously got a bit more in there, you can see, but I don't really use anything to polish this. I don't really feel the need to put anything on here to kind of polish it. If you need to polish your violin, if you're thinking of doing that, then I wonder whether you've got one of those more student quality violins, or maybe one of the cheaper ones that have quite a high, thick varnish kind of shine to them. If that is the case, I mean, then you can use a little bit of I have in the past on when I've had those violins, you can use a very small amount of like furniture polish, something like that, wood polish, anything like that. Nothing that's got a wood stain in it, but just off the top of my head, Pledge. I don't know if you've got Pledge in the US or not, but just in the UK, it's just Pledge furniture polish. A very, very, very small amount. It's very small amount, but ideally, I mean, you shouldn't really sort of need to be doing that. But if you have something that's very high gloss, you're not going to have something that's probably very expensive, because the more expensive violins don't really tend to have those thick varnishes. They're a different type of hand varnish rather than a gloss. So I don't touch this violin. I don't really bother to clean it because I don't really need to, and I don't want to ruin the wood. The only thing I do is get a like a yellow duster, or one of those that you use to clean the inside of the car with, and you mustn't wash with any conditioner. I can't forget what they're called now, but it'll come to me later on. But a cloth with nothing on, no water, nothing like that, and all you're going to do is just wipe away under here, and that's all you need to do, just to really get rid of the rosin. Sorry, apologies about that. I'm going to turn my phone off. So that's all you need to do. Okay. Persian. Oh, did I? Okay, sorry, I missed your question. Hold on. We're going back to it. Okay, Persian says, last week question, can you explain page 40 and 44, book 2 violin? Hold on a second. Apologies for missing your question. If I miss anybody's question, sorry. Sometimes I don't always see them. Just ask them again. And I'll try my best to answer it. So page 40. Okay, so page 40, we're talking about dotted rhythms. Can you give me a little bit more information? Page 44. Sorry, I'm just having a look. I'm just catching up. I mean, assuming that you've read everything about, so dotted rhythm starts on page 39. So anybody that's got this book, you'll be able to see this. The dotted rhythms start on page 39, and there's quite a lot of information on the dotted rhythms. I assume that you've read this and you've watched the video that goes with it as well. What specifically? Let me know what specifically is confusing you. Let me know, and I will come back to your question. Let's move on for now. Okay. It's Sir Spongadoodle. It's 4 a.m. here in Australia. Wow. Okay, Hikagaya 001. I have had a rosin which came with the violin. I don't even know the brand. Unfortunately, it fell and broke into pieces, and now I don't know whether I should use the broken pieces or buy a new one. It doesn't really matter if your rosin is broken. A lot of people say that. The rosins are quite, as soon as you drop them on a hard floor, they do just tend to break. You can use them if you've got a large enough piece to use. It's not, your bow isn't going to, nothing's going to happen to the bow, nothing's going to happen to the rosin or anything. More of it is just going to be exposed to air, so it might just go a bit gunky or a bit drier quicker. But as long as there are no sharp, jagged edges on the rosin, I don't see any reason why you can't. I'm sure I remember breaking a rosin back in the day when I was younger. We've all done it, and I have had pieces of rosin. Sometimes the cloth that the pieces of rosin come on, some of it breaks off on the floor, and then some of it you get a little bit that is still stuck to the cloth, and it's still fine to use. So as long as you've got a flat enough piece, you can still use it. You don't want anything sharp and jagged particularly, because then you don't want it, obviously when you're using it, you don't want it to be slicing into the hairs and slicing that off. But there is no reason why you can't, or use it as an opportunity to buy yourself a really nice expensive violin rosin. And by expensive rosin, I mean, what would be expensive? $15, £15, $20, £20, something like that. I know it sounds a lot of money for rosin, but it'll be something that will keep you going for a really long time. Okay, Nicholas, hi, how are you? Um, right. I don't want to miss any questions. Okay, Brian says again, he's on lesson 8, been working through for 3 weeks, 30 to 40 minutes a day. He's currently on exercise 5. How's my progress? Progress sounds fine. Progress is always a difficult one. Everybody always asks this. How long does it take to learn the violin? How long does it take to get through this? How long does it... It really does depend on the individual. The only answer I can give you is that there is no you should get lesson 1 done in a week. You should get lesson 2 in this time. That doesn't exist because it changes for everybody. So what I will say is that if you practice hard, you practice as you should. And by practicing hard, I don't necessarily mean that you have to spend 4 hours a day practicing. Just a good amount of day, 30 to 40 minutes is a good amount of day practicing. As long as you feel like you've worked hard in that session and you feel like you are better at the end of your practice session than you were at the start of your practice session, and you do that every day, then you're going to get very, very good progression. You're going to be where you should be, and you're going to be, because you're doing all the things that you're doing. What you don't want to be doing in your practice sessions is just using them to just play things over and over and over, because you're not actually going to get anywhere. All you're doing is just playing over what you've sort of already done. You're not actually getting any better. So if you get to that point and you are playing over and over and over and you don't really feel like you're improving, but you don't really know what else to improve on, then it may be time to move on. Maybe that you have already got to the level that specific exercise or piece or whatever needs to be at, and now it's time to move on to the next level. If you feel like it just doesn't sound very good and you've still got more to work on, then continue kind of working on it. But as long as you are achieving things in your practice session and not just going over them, which is what a lot of people do, they just play the same thing over and over once or twice and then that's it, I'm done, that's practice. That isn't practice. That's just reiterating what you've already done. You're not actually... Practice is something that you start off being at this level, and then at the end of the practice session you end up at that level because you've actually improved. So it sounds fine, but as I said, all I can say is that as long as you practice smart and you practice well every day, then you will progress at the level that is appropriate for you. Okay. Katie, yes, polishing. If you're going to professionally polish a violin, it's something that a violin luthier would do. I would never put pledge on my violin for sure. No, and I would never put pledge on my violin, but I was only just referring to the really, really cheap ones. If somebody's got, I'm talking, less than $100 that are going to be very thickly coated in varnish, I don't see that would have any issue. But the point is they're going to get quite grubby quite quickly because they're highly varnished in quite a thick layer of varnish. So that's going to feel like they're just getting kind of greasy with all the finger marks, and I don't see that a little bit of pledge polish would do any harm to that. And they're quite cheap. But obviously, if you've got a nice violin, then absolutely not. I wouldn't be doing anything, and I don't even polish my violin. I don't touch it because I don't need to, because it doesn't really get grimy. What I do every so often is just take it to a violin luthier, and he will clean the wood. He will he'll re-hand varnish it. He'll do everything that he needs to do. Once he's taken it all apart and given it a kind of an MOT himself, and he will do that as part of the routine maintenance that he would check on the violin. Okay, Nicholas, how many scales does one have to do in a practice session? How many repetitions is sufficient in order to have enough time practicing various pieces of music? So if you were following a course, you would have a set sort of number of scales that you need to do. Generally, when you're learning scales, or when I would be teaching scales, the scales that I would be teaching, or the scales and arpeggios that I would be teaching, go hand in hand with the exact level that the player is at, or the student is at. So, for example, if you're following along on book 2, lessons 11 to 20, for example. If you go to So if you go to lesson 11, straight away it starts you up on scales. Now these are the scales and arpeggios that go hand in hand with this book. So you won't do very well on the pieces if you're not practicing these scales. So there's some more scales here as well. So you don't necessarily have to keep doing all of the previous scales that you've done, because don't forget there are 36 different scales and arpeggios, and with each one of those you can do each scale 1 octave, each scale 2 octave, each scale 3 octaves, some scales 4 octave depending on where they start on the violin. Some 5 octave scales, you can do them slurred bowed, separate bows, 2 slurs to a bow, 3 slurs to a bow, 4 slurs. So there's lots of different things that you can do within a bunch of scales to increase the technical ability of them. So how many scales is a bit of a difficult question, but I would generally say if you are starting out, then you'll want to be doing things like G major scale, D major scale, A major scale. And if you wanted to stick with those 3, but you wanted to make them difficult or much harder, then make them 2 octaves, or make the G major scale 3 octaves, make the A major scale 3 octaves, make the D major scale 3 octaves, and things like that. Instead of doing them separate bow, do them slurred bows. So it's not necessarily about how many particular scales, but it's what type of scales. So when you move up to another level of competency, so maybe you're further on in book 2, then you can add in some more scales. So we can add in things like E minor scale, B minor scale. So then you're practicing 5 or 6 scales, something like that. So eventually it will be cumulative. So eventually you'll be practicing a lot more scales. So you'll be practicing, all of the scales and things. But generally, depending on where you are in your learning, will depend on what particular portion of scales that you're going to be practicing at any one time. But to put a number to it, maybe 5 or 6 scales, something like that you should be practicing. How many repetitions is sufficient in order to have enough time for practicing various pieces of music? Again, it doesn't really work like that. I can't tell you to play a piece of music 6 times and that's enough, because all you're doing is you're doing exactly what you've just said. You're just repeating it. Are you practicing it? No, you're just repeating it. So if you just want to keep a piece at exactly the same level and you don't want to get better or worse at it, then you just repeat it. But if you want to get better at a piece, then you need to really get down and you need to focus and look at it. So the mistake that most beginner violinists make, let me just get to a piece of music. The mistake that most people make, for example, is just starting here and then playing to the end, start, finish, and they're going over and over and over, maybe 3 or 4 times. That's taken them 10 minutes. Right, next, turn the page, let's move on to the next one. And then they're off and away on the next one and they're doing exactly the same thing. But that isn't practice. That is just repeating the same stuff over and over. So if you're constantly making a mistake at this point here, for example, you're repeating that mistake, and then that mistake becomes the norm, and that mistake becomes very difficult to then get out of the habit of doing because you're playing from start to finish. So you can't really say how many repetitions suffices as a practice, because it's not about repetitions. It's about really focusing in on the piece itself and what it is about that piece that you need to get better at, if that sort of makes sense. Okay, how are we doing? Trying to get through as many questions as I can. Adam, what's your opinion on different bows? Pernambuco, carbon fibre, what's your preference? In a nutshell, I've answered this question before. Pernambuco is what I have, which is more just it's like a Brazilian kind of mix of wood. I like wood bows. I don't like carbon fibre bows. That's just my personal opinion of them. I don't feel carbon fibre bows have the flexibility or the bend in them that you get with the wood bow. A wood is just more softer and more pliable, depending on the type of bow that you get as well. Obviously, there are more expensive Pernambucan bows, cheaper Pernambucan bows, that kind of thing. But with the carbon fibre, I don't really find them flexible enough to do the technical things that suit the things that I'm doing. So I don't forget, I'm a classical violinist, so I'm playing a lot of high-end technical stuff. A carbon fibre bow, for me personally, isn't going to cut it. If you like a carbon fibre bow, then that's great, but that's, obviously that's just my opinion. I find them less flexible than nice wooden bows. Okay. Persian, why don't you send me write a comment underneath a video explaining it, and I will see if I can explain there rather than in here, because it's going to take quite a bit of explaining for your question, and I don't want to take up too much time here. So write your question in a comment underneath the video, and I would explain. We'll sort it out. We'll sort it out underneath in a comment under a video. So any video, comment your question, and I'll reply to you there if that's okay. Okay, MS. My left hand is very dumb and uncoordinated. What can I do to get better? What can I do to better get it to do vibrato? Everybody's left hand is just not very good. Well, I'm assuming that your right hand is your dominant and your left hand is not. It is very difficult. My left hand is also quite stupid compared to my right hand, and my left hand just doesn't want to do what it won't do what it wants to do. But you have to force it and you have to train it, and vibrato takes a very, very long time. If you're sort of thinking to yourself that vibrato is just taking you a really long time to nail, you will be able to do it. Like I said, my left hand is really stupid compared to my right hand, yet I can still do vibrato because I just made it do it. It's just because you're not used to thinking, you're not used to sending those signals to your left hand. I mean, if I were to put the violin on the other side, this is very peculiar. I mean, I can't even do vibrato with my right hand, and this is my right hand. So I mean, what's up with that? I should be able to do vibrato like that with my right hand, but I know how to do it because I teach it and I know what my left hand does. But I mean, I can't even do it. So suffice to say that my right hand is really stupid when it comes to vibrato, but that isn't true because my right hand is my dominant hand. But why is it that I can do vibrato perfectly well with my left hand? Because it's just a technique that I've just trained myself to do. So it's not going to be anything to do with the fact that your left hand is just a bit sillier than your right hand and it's just very uncoordinated. Just train it to do that, but it will take you a very, 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 very long time to nail vibrato. You've just got to be consistent and you've just got to keep going with it. That's the best tip I can give you with that. Hi, Tessa. Okay. Kevmuth Mary F. Thank you for showing how to rosin the bow. I played in school and took a 50-year break. Wow, and couldn't think of why my new violin sounded terrible. I wasn't rosining enough. Yeah, if it just sounds a bit kind of hollow, just a bit weird, wispy would be another way to describe it. Just make sure you just add a bit more rosin on there. Okay, we got some questions down here. Right, how are we doing for time? We're okay. Right. Bia says, how do you play a note that has a downward line going through the stem? I think you are talking about, just trying to think if I've got any samples off the top of my head. I think you are talking about a grace note. So you just play the grace note very quickly. Are you talking about? Are you talking about one of? Oh, there we go. Are you talking about one of those little ones there? So if that is the case, then it's more of a grace note. So it would be more something like. Hold on a second. So it's just more like a little da-da. Let me just turn that down a little bit. I know it's a bit fragmented. That it doesn't really make any sense. This was from Chanson de Matin. I was just trying to play a piece of that. So it's just something like. So it's just a grace note. That's it really. I can't really demonstrate it any other way. Other than that, really, it's a grace note that you would just play quickly in front of another piece, another note. That's all that is. Okay. Oh, okay. Motivation galore. Which violin would you recommend for beginners? I do believe underneath this video, if not, I'll put it in. I've got a recommendation of Fiddlerman violins. I couldn't really pick one violin. There's lots of violins. All I can say is that I have reviewed a lot of the Fiddler Shop or the Fiddlerman violins, and they're all great as beginner violins, but which one really does depend on what you're looking for and your budget. So head to the playlist and have a look. Have a look on those, but there isn't really one violin that I can just pick out because it really does depend on you, what you're looking for, and mostly your budget. Okay. I just want to make sure I haven't missed any yet, which I don't think I have. EOM, I think that's right. Should we learn as a beginner with book number 1 or learn scale book number 2? So if you're talking about the course, follow the course. Everything is all laid out there, so just follow on from the course. If you'll get to do the scales as you see them in the book. The good dumbs. What is the easiest music to play for beginners? It depends what kind of beginner you are. Depends what you are. Depends what you're doing. It literally, I don't really know. A very difficult question to answer because I don't really know what actual level that you are at. So I'm not really sure I can quite answer that question. It's not really a case of what's the easiest piece to play for beginners, because it depends on what type of beginner you sort of are, and where you are, what you're learning, and all that kind of thing. Let me turn that back up again. Bia says recording yourself is very helpful. You can hear when you're making mistakes. Yes, that's true. Okay. Oh, we've all caught up. What, Bia? What? Just send me an email. I'll put. I think you know my emails. Just send me an email. Send me an email of the picture. Yeah, and I'll reply to you there. It's probably the easiest thing to do. But that's the one that I showed you. It's called an acciaccatura or an appoggiatura. So that must be. It's the only one that I can think of that has a line down the note. So it has to be an appoggiatura or an acciaccatura, and you play it just exactly how I demonstrated it. Really, you might see it in a different variation. That was just one very quick example that I could just find off the top of my head. But if there is a little tiny note with a line through it, it will be an acciaccatura, which is just like a little grace note preluding to the main note. Okay. Right, I'm going to stop there because I don't want these lives to go on too long. I apologise if I haven't answered anyone's questions. Just send me emails or just write them in the comments underneath and I will reply to you. If not, I will see you next week. Next week's day and time may be a little bit different because I have to change things next weekend. So when I come to schedule next week's live stream, I'll put all the details up in there, and I will try and do that as soon as I can over the weekend. But thank you ever so much for joining me. I hope you all have a lovely weekend, and I hope you all have a lovely week, and I will see you at some point next week. Date and time to be confirmed. But thank you all for joining me, and I will see you all in next week's live. Bye.